This is Catalina Gutierrez, an influencer and budding architect who lived in the heart of Argentina. But on a random evening in July of 2024, she would suddenly vanish, leaving her family, friends, and more than 100,000 followers in fear. While the police slowly clocked in to investigate, Catalina's parents were hard at work listening to rumors growing around town. And after following reports of an ominous vehicle, they were left with a very chilling discovery. But sadly, that would only be the beginning of horrible shocks to this terrible story. Welcome back to Coffee House Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, and today we're diving into the horrible world of betrayal, suppression, and rejection. Oh, and we're heading to Argentina for this one, staying loyal to our international true crime series. By the way, if you'd like to see more true crime and coffee, then please do consider subscribing. And now, with that out the way, please grab yourself a coffee and let's caffeinate while we investigate. This is the case of Catalina Gutierrez. Buenos dias, folks, and welcome to the enchanting land of Argentina. Nestled between the towering Andes of Chile and the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, Argentina proudly holds the title of the 8th largest country in the world. Now, this should come as no surprise to you, but it has an extraordinarily diverse and expansive landscape that bursts with life at every single turn. However, beneath this picturesque surface lies a darker reality. The beauty of Argentina's natural wonders is marred by the shadows of deforestation and pollution, which, of course, is driven by the relentless march of expansive farming and grazing for the food industry, all in the name of profit. And unfortunately, that is not the only thing falling prey here. The very fabric of Argentine society is threatened, much like its environment. That's because corruption runs deep within the economic veins of this country, as Argentina grapples with a crime rate much higher than the global average, which includes the distinction of having the 9th highest murder rate in the entire world. So sadly, I guess you could say it is no wonder why we're drawn to explore this nation today. Our journey takes us back to the year 2023 and to the vibrant city of Cordoba. You can find Cordoba roughly 500 miles northwest of the bustling capital Buenos Aires. I suppose you could describe Cordoba as a key economic, political, and educational center, making it one of the wealthiest cities in the country. However, much like the rest of the nation, it does also face extremely high crime rates, ranging from small things like pickpocketing and scams, right the way through to murders and drug trafficking, which, of course, keeps the police busy. It was on the warm evening of July the 18th, 2023, that a heavy air of unease settled over a small family from the Einaudi neighborhood. And that's because their daughter, Catalina Gutierrez, was missing. And as the moon set and the sun began to rise, there was still no sign of her whatsoever. The Gutierrez family tried to stay hopeful, but as the hours ticked by, that concern would slowly turn into dread. And so, together and making the right decision, they walked through the doors of their local police station to report her as missing. The group was a somber mix of Catalina's closest circle, including her mother, Eleonora, her father, Marcelo, her sister, Lucia, her boyfriend, Lazaro Oliveda, and her friend, Nestor Soto. The group reported that the last time anyone saw Catalina was around 9 p.m. the evening before. It is noted that she was in good spirits and left her family to meet friends for a casual night of bowling at the Patio Olmos shopping center, which is a popular spot in the heart of the city. Before heading out, she sent a cheerful voice message to her boyfriend, Lazaro, assuring him that she was on her way and that she was looking forward to seeing him soon. Sadly, that promise was never fulfilled because Catalina would never arrive at the shopping center. In fact, that voice message that she had sent to him would be the last one that anyone would ever receive from her. As the hours crept into the night, her loved ones grew increasingly alarmed. Not only would calls to her phone go unanswered, but her texts remained unread, which really was an anomaly for Catalina, who was never without her phone and would always respond when in need. It was in that moment that her friends, who were confused and worried, reached out to her family, only to discover that they too had heard nothing since she left the home. As the night dragged on, so did their restless pacing and their silent prayers. And by morning, well, that brought no relief either, because there was no sign of Catalina and no reassuring message to explain her absence. And as we know, by midday, they decided to head down to the police station. Lazaro and Nesta would join the family shortly after, with their presence a clear testament not only to the love, but also the concern that Catalina inspired in those around her. And with no confidence in the situation, it is no surprise that they all demanded support immediately. Now, unfortunately, the news of Catalina's disappearance came at the same time as a few other unsettling rumors. Residents from another neighborhood in the city called the authorities to report of an unfamiliar face lurking in the shadows, and by sunrise, they noticed an unknown vehicle on the side of the road. With smoked-out windows, bystanders could not get a proper view inside the vehicle. Not that they wanted to, because not only was it damaged, but it reeked of ash. And as you may or may not be guessing, a horrible surprise lay within. But before we continue, who precisely was Catalina Gutierrez? And how did this horrible mystery unfold? Catalina Gutierrez was born in the year 2003 to her devoted parents, Eleonora Vollenweider and Marcelo Gutierrez. It was shortly after her birth that the family of four, which was completed by her older sister Lucia, decided to settle on the outskirts of Cordoba City, where they would then go on to build a warm and nurturing home. Her father, Marcelo, was a renowned architect, which of course brought creativity and ambition into the household, while her mother, Eleonora, devoted herself to raising their two daughters, ensuring that they all had a very happy and balanced lifestyle. Catalina and Lucia shared an unshakable sisterly bond. They were well known to grow up not only as siblings, but also as best friends. It was no one other than their father who sincerely appreciated this closeness, proudly saying that his daughters had a divine connection and would rarely quarrel as they grew up. Catalina was very close to her father too, and she leaned into his passions. This mostly included music and travel, and from a young age, he would even teach her to play the guitar, which is a skill that she would enjoy throughout her teenage years. Inspired by her father's passion in his career, Catalina dreamed of following him in his footsteps. And so, after graduating from high school, she made that dream become a reality by enrolling in the University of Cordoba to study architecture. Catalina was more than just a bright student. She was so radiant to be around as described by her friends. Her friendly, bubbly, and confident personality made her absolutely magnetic, and her beauty and her charm extended well beyond her immediate circle. We know this because she was actually very popular through social media. Through her Instagram and her TikTok accounts, Catalina shared many snapshots of her life, this including her stylish outfits, her adventures around Cordoba, her travels with friends and family, and the cherished moments she spent with her sister Lucia, and of course her dog. Her content resonated widely amongst people, as in total she would amass over 100,000 followers on Instagram and 35,000 followers on TikTok. It was through this online popularity that she would also find sponsorship opportunities from local brands, which not only provided her a sense of business ownership, but also financial support for her studies. Moving into university, this would also bring many new connections and opportunities, which in her case included love. And it was around this time that she would cross paths with a man named Lazaro Lavida. Both studying architecture and sharing a deep Christian faith, Catalina and Lazaro quickly found common ground. Their connection grew naturally, and not before long, their bond blossomed into a loving relationship. They soon became official, and it was clear to everyone around them just how smitten they were with each other. Their love was undeniable, and they were very open about their relationship too, often sharing many pictures of their life together on social media, a move that, for many female influencers, is often considered to be detrimental to their image. The couple stayed in constant contact with each other, so much so that, on the night she disappeared, we know that her final message was sent to him. Her voice message was short but sweet, and unfortunately, was sure to leave a chilling impression on him in the hours after. All she said was, "I'm on my way, my love, see you soon." With Lazaro not only being her partner, but also the last one to hear from her, he was destined to be a key person of interest. However, his alibi was rock solid, because not only was he with friends in the middle of a shopping centre, but this centre was littered with surveillance cameras, so officers deemed him to be innocent very quickly. Now, it is worth noting here that with Catalina being an adult, and also an adult who hadn't been missing for more than 24 hours, the police were quite reluctant to get involved at this stage. And so, as you can imagine, especially in a city that is quite rife in crime, her case was not treated with immediate haste. However, this did not sit well with her family, because they knew at the bottom of their hearts that she would never leave them in the dark like that. And so, they decided to do their own investigating. Retracing Catalina's movements on the night of July the 16th, her family pieced together the final moments leading up to her disappearance. Now, they knew that she had left home in her mother's silver Renault Clio, and then planned to pick up her close friend Nestor Soto, before then heading to the Patio Olmos shopping centre. So, naturally, this was a good place to start. However, when her mother called Nestor to check in, he told her that Catalina never actually arrived, and therefore failed to pick him up. Glancing out of his window, he saw nothing unusual in his quiet residential street, and after realizing that something was awry, he decided to reach out to Lazaro in the morning. By now, Lazaro was deeply worried about his girlfriend, and so the two began to search for Catalina. But sadly, despite their efforts, they would find no trace of her. By midday, they joined her family at the police station. While filing the report, Catalina's sister would reveal that they always shared their locations via their phones for safety. And so, checking Catalina's iPhone, Lucia found it to be pinging at 3900 Pedro Echag Street, which is a residential area found in South Cordoba. Rather concerningly, this lead would coincide with reports from other neighborhood residents. Residents who called the authorities to report that strange people had been lurking in the area the night prior, and that an unfamiliar car had now appeared overnight. The connection between these details seemed to be far too coincidental, therefore prompting the police to investigate and find out what was going on with that vehicle. And sadly, what they found would irreparably shatter the lives of the Gutierrez family. Upon arriving at the scene, officers would spot the silver Renault Clio parked along the roadside. Inside the vehicle's back seat, they made a grim discovery, that being the partially burned remains of a young woman. As you can likely guess, the victim was soon identified to be Catalina. It appeared that the fire had been set hastily and rather unsuccessfully, leaving most of her body intact. The area was then sealed off for investigation, while Catalina's remains were sent in for autopsy, and the autopsy's results would reveal a horrifying truth. The fire had not been the cause of her death, and merely was an attempt to destroy all evidence. The actual cause was asphyxiation, and her body bore multiple physical injuries, which suggested that she had been violently attacked. With the discovery of Catalina's remains, the missing persons report was naturally turned into a homicide investigation. With that said, two key questions emerged here. Who was responsible for her murder, and why? From here on out, the authorities were quick to identify several key suspects, which, as we know, included her boyfriend Lazaro. However, as we know, surveillance cameras and eyewitnesses would rule him out quite early. And so, with that in mind, the authorities diverted their attention to the next person who should have seen her, that being Nestor. And when detectives learned that he had no rock-solid alibi, they decided to dig a little deeper. As I've already said, she was expected to pick him up so the two could then go to the mall together. But, as we know, he claims that she never actually made it to his property. Which is quite interesting to say the least, because that is not what her mobile phone data was saying. Phone records show that she'd spent a total of 38 minutes outside or around his property, and when they decided to look even closer, they realized that Nestor had deleted several text messages, which, if you ask me, are not really the actions of an innocent man. And so, with the spotlight now slowly focusing on him, I think it's about time to introduce you to Nestor Soto. Nestor Soto, known by his friends as Nuni, was a friend of Catalina's. Originally from the Bariloche region of Argentina, which is a stunning area near the Chilean border, Nestor made a significant move to pursue his dream of studying architecture. Of course, it was this ambition that eventually brought him into Catalina's life. Their social circles overlapped, and eventually the two became close friends. They got on very well. However, Catalina was already in a committed relationship. Not only that, but she never expressed any romantic interest in Nestor either. To Catalina, their bond was purely platonic. Nestor was a regular visitor to the Gutierrez household, and he would even spend plenty of time around her boyfriend and her dog. So, his boundaries should have been very obvious not only to him, but also to others. He joined family barbecues, studied with Catalina, and played with the family dog. And so, by all counts, he seemed like a harmless and a supportive friend, with Catalina's mother recalling nothing unusual about him. However, beneath the surface, Nestor harbored deep feelings far beyond friendship. In fact, he was obsessively in love with Catalina, to the point where his admiration bordered on fantasy. He would seize every opportunity to spend time with her, frequently contacted her, and was a constant presence in her online lifestyle, engaging with many posts at every single turn. Although he would outwardly respect her relationship with Lazaro, it did become quite clear that his suppressed emotions were simmering dangerously close to the surface. Rather concerningly, but as soon as Nestor fell into detective spotlight, there were several troubling stories about his past which emerged. For example, a former classmate of Catalina's shared a disturbing encounter with him at camp, where he'd attempted to force himself on her after a night out. Apparently, she had to physically push him away and shout at him after he refused to take no for an answer. Another woman, who was a former girlfriend of his, would also come forward to describe Nestor as possessive and extremely controlling during the relationship. These two revelations painted a chilling picture of a man who, when denied what he wanted, could lash out not only in dangerous but also violent ways. So, if he could behave so aggressively towards a classmate in a casual setting, then what might he be capable of when consumed by an obsessive infatuation with someone that he could never have? Well, despite these dark undercurrents, Catalina never expressed any concerns about Nestor. To her, he was simply one of her closest friends, and someone she trusted and welcomed into her life. This information, along with the mobile phone data, was finally enough to obtain a search warrant and also arrest Nestor while they searched his property. In the meantime, he was questioned about Catalina's death. And, well, let me just say that during that interview, it became quite clear that he was not naturally good at lying. While being questioned, his story would change from, "I never saw her that night," to, "Well, okay, maybe I saw her, but only for a couple minutes." It was quite clear that he did not know how to handle the pressure, and with more questions being asked, he became even more visibly shaken. And that, my friends, is when he finally broke down, before bursting into tears and muttering the words, "She was the love of my life." What came next was a gruesome confession, and a confession that left Catalina's family absolutely disgusted at this man who they once considered a good friend. With Nestor in custody and under questioning, and plenty of evidence mounting against him, detectives created a rough timeline of the night in question. Detectives concluded that Catalina had left the family home at around 9 PM, before then sending a message to Nestor to say that she was on her way. Nestor responded twice before then deleting the entire conversation, which, as we now know, was an early attempt to cover his tracks. By the time she arrived at his home, Nestor was waiting for her. The exact details of what transpired still, unfortunately, remains unclear. However, investigators believe that, while the car was still stationary outside of his home, he revealed his true romantic feelings for her. And when Catalina rejected him, well, that is when he snapped, and the situation escalated into violence. While still seated in her mother's car, she was then subjected to a brutal attack from one of her best friends. The evidence available suggests that Nestor strangled her, before then inflicting multiple blunt force trauma injuries across her body. Despite the violence, there were no defensive wounds on Nestor, which indicated that Catalina may have not had any chance to fight back. Tragically, after taking her life, he then moved Catalina's body body to the back seat of the car and then drove away. At roughly 10:20 p.m., a traffic camera captured Eleonora's silver Renault Clio traveling along Valparaiso Avenue, a main road between Nesta's home and the location where the car and her remains would later be discovered. He then drove to 3900 Pedro Echagüe Street, where he then parked the car and attempted to set it on fire to destroy all evidence. However, this is where he would make one crucial oversight, and that was leaving Catalina's phone inside the vehicle. The phone which would later be used to find her location. But then again, the scene was left in such a careless state that it likely wouldn't have taken long for her body to be found. In a calculated effort to appear innocent, Nesta then called Catalina's mother only a few minutes after setting her daughter on fire. He called her mother a total of 8 times, claiming that he hadn't seen Catalina and pretending to look out of his window for her. He would even join her boyfriend Lazaro in the search efforts the following morning, and then would join the family at the police station. When Catalina's body was then found, Nesta comforted her family, hugged Eleonora, and would even share in their grief, all while knowing that he was the actual cause. As we know, this horrible, calculated behavior was a cold attempt to deflect any suspicion and maintain the facade that he was apparently a concerned friend. In hindsight, many of Nesta's actions did actually appear suspicious. However, at the time, his deceitful efforts were enough to avoid any sort of immediate detection. And as we know, the full extent of his betrayal would only become apparent as the investigation progressed. To add to the evidence, police officers would later find her ring hidden inside his bedroom, a gruesome trophy to keep after murdering his best friend. With all of this evidence and Nesta's initial confession taken into account, he was then arrested and charged with aggravated homicide. And although his original confession was in fact submitted as evidence, once legal proceedings began and he secured legal representation, he then refused to provide any further recorded statements or confessions. So, although he has yet to actually stand trial, I do think it is quite obvious how this will end, considering that his initial confession is more than enough to sink him. As of the time of publishing this video, Nesta still remains in preventative detention just outside of Cordoba, where, no surprise, he often receives death threats from many other inmates. Given his young age and skinny build, he is considered to be quite vulnerable to violence, coercion, and other things within the prison environment. And on that basis, he is usually kept away from the other inmates. After further review by law enforcement, an additional charge of gender violence was added to his case. Combined with the charge of aggravated homicide by treachery, Nesta now faces the possibility of a life sentence, which obviously is bad news for him and the rest of his time alive. From here on out, digital forensics are expected to shed further light on the nature of his relationship with Catalina, which, quite understandably, could significantly influence the jury's decision. Understanding the dynamics of their relationship is quite crucial here, as it may help clarify Nesta's motives, and even determine whether the attack was premeditated. But, according to the prosecutor's office, this case is considered straightforward. Unless new and unexpected evidence emerges, there is now no indication that this trial will face any delays. However, Nesta's psychological state is also a factor to be considered, which is quite interesting because so far he has refused to cooperate with his defense team regarding any psychiatric or psychological evaluation. Rushing to his defense, his mother has claimed that he was under severe stress when leading up to the crime, though quite honestly, it remains extremely difficult to feel any sympathy for him. Despite his silence on the matter, Nesta has reportedly expressed severe remorse through his attorney. He has also offered an apology to Catalina's family, though he has yet to issue any formal statement about her murder. As you may expect, this case sent shockwaves across Argentina. Both Catalina and Nesta were young, intelligent, and full of potential. And with both of these lives being wasted, it really did surprise the nation. This story is a sobering reminder of the devastating consequences of not only unchecked emotions, but also hidden obsessions. With this case still unresolved at the time of this video being posted, Catalina's family are still yet to find the closure they need, and they still mourn the loss of their daughter. Her body still remains in police custody as it may be used as evidence in Nesta's trial. Quite naturally, this is a horrible situation for Catalina's family to be in, who desperately wish to cremate her as soon as possible. Catalina's father, who is overwhelmed with grief, has since shared his anguish with reporters. He said, I am in pain and I don't understand it. The only thing I want is justice, and for him to rot in prison for the rest of his life, because he does not deserve to live in this society. As the legal proceedings continue, Catalina's friends, family and peers are all left to grieve without any closure. At the start of the new semester, her classmates honoured her memory by placing a sign on an empty chair which read, "Cata should be here." Meanwhile, and online, fans who were touched by Catalina paid tribute to her and described her as a poor angel. Collectively, they all call for justice through Nesta's trial, all while remembering her and the impact on her community. But for her family, this loss is deeply personal and immeasurable. They remember Catalina as a joyful, generous, and loving individual, a perfect student with a promising future. To them, she was the embodiment of happiness, kindness, and music, and her absence has left an unfillable void in their daily lives. As they navigate this heartbreaking journey, one can only hope that the future brings justice. To me, it is very clear that her tragic passing has touched many people across the country, and my heart goes out not only to her family, but her friends too. Now, unfortunately, that is all the information I have at the time of this video being published, but as this case continues to progress through trial, I promise to update you either in the pinned comments or on social media. With that said, if you would like to stay updated, then please do consider subscribing to this channel or checking me out on social media, most notably my Instagram. Now, personally, I think it is extremely obvious that Nesta will go down as guilty in this case. But what do you think will happen? As always, please share your thoughts in the comments section down below. So, Nero hasn't had much screen time recently, so I thought I'd give you a bit of an update. He's really enjoying Australia, and yeah, he was getting quite skinny, weren't you? Yeah, you were getting quite skinny when you flew over. So he's gained over 1.5 kilos now, and he's looking nice and chunky and healthy. And yeah, don't tell him I said this, but he's quite scared of the Australian birds. Also, he has no idea how many people actually love him, which is crazy. Anyway folks, I think that pretty much wraps up this case today. Thank you so much for watching and making it this far, and as always, I'll see you again very, very soon for another video. However, until that moment arrives, please remember to look after yourselves, look after each other, and as always, stay safe. Thank you, and goodbye.